I've always considered myself a practical guy, someone who plans for the future and makes sure our finances stay stable. My wife, Laura, and I had built a life together based on that stability. We'd been married for 10 years, and I thought we were a good team, both working toward shared goals. We had a joint savings account, and every month, we'd contribute what we could, all for the plans we'd made together, a house upgrade, maybe kids one day, and, when life finally slowed down, some well-earned travel. It felt like we had everything laid out neatly in front of us. It wasn't until recently that I began to feel that something was off. Laura had started acting differently, her usual warmth giving way to more private behaviors. I noticed she'd been glued to her phone, hiding it whenever I entered the room, always guarded. She'd shrug it off when I asked, saying it was work-related stress or just friends venting about their lives. But her distant behavior wasn't the only thing that had changed. I also noticed her spending habits seemed different. Laura had always been careful with money, someone who'd take her time comparing prices even for small things. But now she was making unexpected purchases, clothes, jewelry, little trips she hadn't mentioned before. When I'd ask about it, she'd brush it off with a laugh and a casual, just treating myself. I didn't think much of it, figuring everyone deserves a little splurge now and then. Then, one day, I came across a charge on our joint credit card that took me by surprise. It was for a high-end restaurant I didn't even know existed in town, and the amount was steep. I didn't recall us dining there, so I asked Laura about it, assuming it was a mistake. Her response was odd, defensive, as though she'd been expecting me to question her. "Oh, that was just with some friends," she said, her eyes not quite meeting mine. It was a celebration for a colleague's promotion. I tried to brush it off, convincing myself that I was overthinking it. But the charge stuck with me, a small itch I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just the restaurant bill, it was the little things piling up, each one feeding into the growing sense of unease that I couldn't shake. One night, curiosity got the better of me. While she was asleep, I looked over our finances, combing through each recent transaction. I felt guilty doing it, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. That's when I stumbled across it, a transfer from our joint account to a different account in Laura's name. Seeing the transfer in her name jolted me, my heart pounding as I stared at the screen. I'd never known Laura to have a separate account. It didn't make sense, we'd always been open about finances. I scrolled through the history, noticing these transfers had been happening regularly, small amounts here and there, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. The total, however, added up to thousands over the last year. The next morning, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Laura, do you have a separate bank account?" I asked, keeping my tone calm, though inside, I was anything but. She looked startled, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she quickly composed herself. "Why are you asking?" she replied, a bit too casually. "Because I noticed transfers going out of our joint account, all to an account with your name on it," I said, watching her reaction carefully. "I thought we were saving together. So why the secrecy?" She hesitated, her face a mix of guilt and defensiveness. "It's just a personal account, Dan," she said finally. "Everyone has their own spending money." I didn't think it was that big of a deal. "Not a big deal?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've been taking money out of our savings, Laura. We agreed that was for us, for our future. I don't understand why you wouldn't tell me about this." She sighed, looking away. "I don't know, maybe I just needed something of my own. Something that didn't have to be discussed or dissected." I tried to accept her answer, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Her evasiveness, the hidden account, and all the uncharacteristic spending, it didn't add up. But instead of pressing further, I let it go, hoping that giving her space might bring some honesty back between us. Over the next few days, though, I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion. If it really was just a personal account, why had she gone to such lengths to keep it a secret? And what exactly was she spending so much on? One evening, after she went out with friends, I decided to do something I'd never thought I'd do. I accessed our computer and managed to find her banking app saved in the browser. My hands shook as I typed in a few guesses for the password, and on the third attempt, I got in. My stomach sank as I looked through her transaction history. There were hotel bookings, expensive dinners, and charges at stores I knew she'd never mentioned to me. The strangest part? The purchases were regular, like clockwork, suggesting that this personal spending was more organized and consistent than she'd led me to believe. I stared at the screen, each transaction feeling like a punch to the gut. Hotel bookings, restaurants, luxury stores, all of it funded from our hard-earned savings, and all of it kept hidden from me. The realization was devastating. This wasn't just her personal account. It was a secret life, one I hadn't even suspected existed. I could barely wrap my head around it. The hotel bookings were the hardest to ignore. They weren't one-offs, they occurred regularly, almost like scheduled meetings. I thought back to the nights she'd mentioned staying late for work or meeting with friends. All those times, I'd been none the wiser, trusting her without question. The implications were sickening, and for a moment, I felt the room spinning. I needed answers. The next morning, when Laura returned from her friend's night, I confronted her directly. "Laura, I found your account transactions," I said, my voice barely masking the hurt and anger boiling beneath the surface. "Hotel stays, fancy dinners, shopping sprees. Who's it all for?" She looked stunned, a mix of shock and guilt flashing across her face. For a brief second, I thought I saw the facade crack, but then she took a deep breath and collected herself. "Dan, it's not what you think," she stammered, clearly scrambling for an excuse. "I just needed space, a way to treat myself. Sometimes work is overwhelming, and I thought a little escape would help me reset." Her words sounded hollow, as though even she didn't fully believe them. "A little escape?" I repeated, struggling to keep my composure. "This isn't a weekend getaway, Laura. These expenses, they're regular. This isn't just me time. Are you seeing someone?" She hesitated, and in that silence, I got my answer. She didn't deny it, didn't offer any plausible explanation. Instead, she looked away, her eyes filling with tears. "Dan, please. I can explain." But the weight of her betrayal crashed over me, and I found myself barely able to listen. "Explain what, Laura? That you've been lying to me for years? That you took our money, the money we saved together, and used it to fund some secret life?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled back, unwilling to let her touch me. "Dan, I didn't mean for it to get this far," she whispered, tears now spilling down her face. "I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. But it's you I love. It was just a distraction." A distraction? The word hit me like a slap. She'd spent years building a life with me while leading a double life behind my back. I couldn't understand how she could justify it as something that just happened. "You had a choice, Laura. Every time you booked a room, every time you spent our money, you chose this distraction over us. And now, you expect me to believe it means nothing?" I asked, voice trembling with hurt. She looked at me, her face a mixture of regret and desperation. "I made mistakes, Dan. Huge ones. But please, don't give up on us. I want to fix this." Her words felt empty. Her pleas lingered in the air, but they felt hollow, like an attempt to salvage what was left only because she'd been caught. "You want to fix this?" I asked, my voice edged with anger and hurt. "How do you even begin to fix years of lies? The secret account, the money, the hotels, all the things you've hidden from me. How am I supposed to look past that?" She wiped her tears, her gaze dropping to the floor. "Dan, I know I've hurt you. I know I've broken something that might never be the same. But I was lost. I don't know how else to explain it. It started as something small, something I thought I could control. And then it got out of hand. Out of hand. I repeated bitterly. Laura, this isn't a mistake. This is an affair. You funded a life with someone else behind my back while pretending to plan a future with me. You stole from us. Our money. Our trust. She flinched, every word sinking in, and I could see the reality hitting her hard. Dan, it wasn't about money, or even him. I don't know why I did it. I think I was just trying to feel something different, something I thought I was missing. But now I see what I've thrown away, and it's tearing me apart. Please. I want to make it right. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words but struggling to accept them. And what about him? Where does he fit into all of this? Is he still in your life? She hesitated, glancing away. Her silence told me everything. I felt my stomach twist, knowing that not only had she betrayed me, but she still hadn't cut ties with him. I need honesty from you, Laura. No more lies, no more half-truths. I need to know, are you still seeing him? She looked up, guilt flooding her face. I ended it, Dan, she whispered. When I realized what I was risking, I cut things off. But I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I could just pretend it never happened, maybe we could go back to the way things were. I shook my head, anger and sadness mixing inside me. So, you thought lying to me forever would fix this? I asked, the bitterness clear in my voice. That hiding it would somehow save our marriage? Her eyes filled with tears, her face full of desperation. I was wrong. I see that now. I've destroyed the most important thing in my life, and for what? A meaningless escape. Please, Dan. Let me prove that I can change, that we can rebuild. I'll do anything. Her words were desperate, but the truth had left a wound so deep I wasn't sure it could ever heal. As she sat there, begging for another chance, I felt torn between the memories of the life we'd built and the harsh reality of her betrayal. The woman I'd trusted, the one I thought I'd known so well, had been living a double life, keeping secrets that unraveled everything we had shared. I wanted to believe her, to believe that she regretted it, but trust, once broken, doesn't come back easily. Do you understand what you're asking me to do, Laura? I said quietly. You're asking me to ignore everything I've found, to pretend that the lies, the secret life, the other man, were just a bad dream. Do you really think I can just look past that? She shook her head, eyes filled with tears. No, I don't expect you to forget, Dan. I know I have to earn your trust again, bit by bit, even if it takes a lifetime. I was wrong. I made horrible choices, and I can't change the past, but I want to try to build a future with you again. If you'll let me. Her words hung heavy in the air, but my mind kept returning to the image of her sneaking off, using our money to fund her time with someone else. How am I supposed to believe that's over? How do I know he won't pop back into your life the moment things get tough? I asked, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. She paused, taking a shaky breath. I'll cut him off completely. I'll show you every message, every call. I want to be an open book if that's what it takes. I'm willing to do anything to prove to you that he's gone and that I'm committed to us. There was something heartbreaking in her desperation, a side of her I hadn't seen before. And yet, the betrayal had left me raw, skeptical. Laura, I'm not sure if there's even anything left to rebuild, I said, struggling with the weight of my own words. You weren't just unfaithful. You broke the foundation of our marriage. You lied to me for years, and now you expect me to believe that everything you're saying is real? Her tears fell freely now, her hands trembling. I know it's hard to believe, but I am done lying, Dan. I'm willing to face whatever you need me to face. Counseling, separation, anything that could bring us back. I'll do it, I'll face the consequences, if you'll just give me a chance. The room was silent, filled only with her sobs and the heavy weight of everything we'd lost. I knew I couldn't make a decision in that moment, the emotions were too fresh, the wounds too raw. "I need time," I finally said, each word feeling like a strain. "I don't know if I can forgive this, Laura. I don't even know if I want to. But I need space to figure out what I want." She nodded, her face crumpling as she struggled to hold back another wave of tears. "I understand. I'll give you whatever time you need, Dan. And I'll be here, waiting, hoping that somehow, you can see how much I want to make this right." Without another word, I left the room, needing air, distance, something to clear my head. I walked outside, trying to breathe through the pain, the anger, the betrayal. The future I thought I had was gone, replaced by an unknown path that I wasn't sure I wanted to walk with her anymore. The days that followed were filled with a mix of numbness and pain. I moved through life like I was on autopilot, trying to process everything and figure out what, if anything, could be salvaged. Laura stayed out of my way, giving me the space I'd asked for, though every now and then I'd catch her watching me, her face etched with regret. One evening, after another long day of avoiding her, I decided I couldn't live in limbo forever. I told her I'd go to counseling with her, but I made it clear that it was only to understand if there was any way to move forward, not a promise to forgive, and not a promise to stay. Our first counseling session was tense. I could feel Laura's anxiety, her guilt weighing down the air between us. The counselor asked her to explain why she'd kept the secret account, why she'd chosen a path that risked everything we had. Her answer was a painful mix of remorse and deflection. "I felt trapped," she said, her voice trembling. "Our life was so planned. I know that's what we wanted, but at some point, I started craving something outside of our routines, something that felt like it was just mine. And then I let it spiral out of control." I listened, feeling the hurt intensify with every word. "So you felt trapped and decided to betray me instead of talking to me?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Did you ever stop to think about what you were risking? About what this would do to me?" She broke down, tears streaming down her face. "I thought about it, Dan, and I hate myself for not stopping sooner. But I know that doesn't change anything. I'll spend the rest of my life regretting it. I don't know how to undo what I've done." In the following sessions, I could see her genuine remorse, her desperation to make things right. She was putting in the work, taking responsibility, and for the first time, I believed she was being honest. But no matter how much she tried, the betrayal lingered, a wound that refused to heal. After weeks of counseling, I came to a decision. I sat her down one evening, taking a deep breath. "Laura, I know you're sorry, and I can see you're trying. But I don't think I can ever look at you without remembering this. It's like a stain on everything we had." She nodded, her face pale, already bracing for what I was going to say. "So, what does that mean?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "It means I can't stay, Laura. I need to let go, for my own sake. I'll always care about you, but I can't live with this shadow between us. I need a fresh start, one where I don't have to question everything." Her face crumpled as she processed my words, tears falling as she nodded in resignation. "I understand, Dan," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I hope you can find peace, even if it's without me." We filed for divorce quietly, without anger, just a shared sadness over what we'd lost. She moved out soon after, and though the emptiness in the house was painful, it felt like the clean break I needed. Months passed, and slowly, I began to heal. I found solace in reconnecting with friends and rediscovering old hobbies. In time, the hurt softened, replaced by a sense of resilience I hadn't known I was capable of. My life was different, but it was mine again, honest, unburdened, and hopeful for what might come next.